Welcome back, and we're jumping into lesson 2 of our GOTV chapter, and we're going to be talking about GOTV methods and reviews. So essentially, like where the rubber really meets the road in GOTV, like how you're actually turning out voters and bringing them along this journey together, and evaluating what those activities are and their power to deliver for us. So as we talked about in last lesson, just want to do a little review here. So we have our different methods that we talked about to bring customers along on the critical milestones along the journey for GOTV. So we talked about mail, phone banking, door-to-door, social media, and texting. So we have our methods, and then we have a evaluation criteria that we're going to be layering on top of all of those. So one, we're going to be looking at the efficacy for delivering on the 5 critical milestones. So we talked about that: awareness, support, tracking, election date, and casting their ballot. That's this journey that we've been talking about, that we bring our voters along. We get them to awareness, then we get them to support, then we get the campaign to track them, and then we get them to be the voters to be aware of the election date, and then we get them to actually cast their ballot. So that's the journey and the milestones on it. So we look at the efficacy of each one of these methods on the left-hand side of delivering on those 5 critical milestones. And then on top of that, we'll layer on something about cost and feasibility. So when we look at evaluation criteria, both number 1 and number 2, then we can give an overall rating to each one of these methods on the left side of the screen here. So that's the general framework, and before we jump into it, just wanted to give a shout out here to this book, just simply called Get Out the Vote: How to Increase Voter Turnout, by Donald Green and Alan Gerber. This book was really helpful for me when I wanted to reference something that was a bit more academic and drew a little more on like traditional political science and scientific methods. So they have a lot of great information in here in case anyone wanted to do a little bit deeper dive on all of this. And it's pretty up to date too. I can't remember exactly when it was. 2015. It's here on the slide. So they start getting into, they talk about email and they kind of reference text messaging, and then sort of talk about social media, but it's not. I think the next edition will give a little bit more robust exploration of those methods. But on others, it's pretty good. So let's jump in here and start our discussion with mail, like traditional snail mail. Essentially, this is, you send mailers to houses. You can put pretty much whatever you want on the mailer itself, but the idea is to, initiate contact with GOTV intent with the voters. So milestone 1, awareness. I've given this a 4 out of 5. But the piece of mail might go straight into the dumpster. But in general, you can get your face and your name and your office that you're voting for, and maybe a tiny little keyword or sentence fragment in with most people about your campaign message. So 4 out of 5 there on awareness. For support, I gave it a lower rating, 2 out of 5, because, like, how believable is this mailer that's hitting their mailbox? When it's election season or campaign season, people get overwhelmed with mailers, and some of them are very inflammatory. So how much belief are voters putting into these things? How much is it actually persuading them to think things through differently or form different opinions? I don't know. That's pretty hard to say. So I give it a low rating there, 2 out of 5. Tracking, it's a 0 out of 5. It's a one-way communication. You send them a piece of mail, it's not coming back to you. Election date, I gave them a 5 out of 5 because the same reasons I mentioned in milestone 1 is that the mailer's probably going to actually be in front of them. They will see it. And when you think about the collective effort of all of the campaigns and all the GOTV efforts going into the voters' homes, then there's it makes it really powerful and effective. So 5 out of 5 there for letting people know about the election date. Milestone 5, casting a ballot. I put 0 out of 5. And this was really because research shows that there is no effect. So in terms of like actually getting people to the ballot to show up and cast their ballot, there's no effect with mail. Cost and feasibility, I gave it a 1 out of 5 because it's expensive. So in this column, cost feasibility, 5 out of 5 means it would be very cheap, very feasible. 1 out of 5 or a 0 out of 5 means that it would be very, very expensive and not very feasible. So 1 is a bad score, 5 is a good score in that regard. The same with the other milestones and pillars we have here. Mail is expensive compared to other types of ads. That's what I have here to say, think of trade-offs. Okay, so when you add all those up, we get a score of 12 for mail. Phone banking. So this is volunteers and you as a candidate placing calls to voters and asking them if they support you and if they plan on voting or if they need help figuring out how to vote. So milestone 1, awareness. I gave it a 2 out of 5 because it's getting harder and harder to reach people on the phone. Furthermore, it's not in writing. It's not something that people can slap up on the fridge or that they leave sitting on their kitchen counter for the week leading up to the election. So it's not something visible right there in front of them to remind them about like your name. And so since it's not written down, that's some points against it. So I gave it 2 out of 5. Milestone 2, support. Same as before. How believable are you? You know, this person is calling like, did you know that Christopher Moore is in support of everything you love in Sutter County? I mean, I don't know. You're a person calling me. You're the same type of person that calls me to make me change my cable service all the time and sell me things. So believability there is low, and so support, 2 out of 5. Milestone 3, tracking. It's above average here, 3 out of 5, and it's you can get information back from people because you're talking to them on the phone. You can say, hey, just curious if you plan on supporting Chris Moore for supervisor on November 6th, and people will generally tell you that yes, no, or I'm not sure. But there's some issues with it. The first, obviously, is it's hard to reach people on the phone, so that's a point against it. And it's a manual process, and it can be error prone because when you have volunteers on the phone and they have to mark down support, oppose, or not sure, and maybe the voter's like, yeah, I support him. Oh, no, I don't. I oppose. Well, I guess I'm not sure. Nah, I support. Okay, I got to go by. How do you record that? Like, what do you do with that? And that happens all the time. And there's little sheets that the volunteers have to mark all this stuff down, then it has to be scanned and put back into a computer system. And if you use something like an all-in-one software like campaign software, it'll spit out these sheets for you pretty easy and print them, or just have it on an iPad or a computer or software that people can share and mark it down in there. So it can be error prone, and of course it's resource intensive. You have to have people having these one-on-one conversations that can be difficult to even get people on the phone. So 3 out of 5 on tracking. Milestone 4, election date, getting people aware of the election date. 2 out of 5, it's the same as awareness. It's hard to reach people, and it's not written down. Milestone 5 for people casting ballots. I give it a 3 out of 5 here on like actually getting people to the polls. So the research is mixed about it. It is a volunteer. It's really volunteer dependent. So how are your volunteers engaging with people on the phone? Like what's their general tone and the language that they're using? All of that goes into it, and that's why the research is really mixed around it. And obviously a huge coordination component to make this effective as well. The most effective phone banking strategies for actually getting people to the ballot or to cast their ballot, getting them to the polls, is when a phone bank is matched up with people on the ground that are going door to door, handing out literature or knocking on doors, asking them if they've gone out to vote. And then also they go to the precincts. I've done this myself way too many times and I care to remember. But you go to the actual polling location in the precinct and they put out lists every hour or two, they update it And it's a big list of every voter that's registered to vote in that precinct, and you can see if they voted or not. They'll be crossed off or not. The poll workers have to cross them off. And this is something that the poll workers are required to do, and it's kind of just a service for people that are conducting GOTV activities. So you go to the polling location, like I'm a volunteer on your campaign. I go to one of the precincts in your district and I look and I see, okay, is so-and-so voted yet? Okay, they have. And then I compare it with my list that I have of supporters. I say, okay, Jose Garcia on Alameda Lane, he has voted. So I can check him off now. And then I go to my next name and I have Mario Perez, Mario Perez, and okay, now let me look at the list that they just put up. No, he's not crossed off yet. Okay, yeah, Mario Perez hasn't voted yet. So then, the on the ground precinct folks, they call in to your campaign headquarters where people are phone banking, and they say, oh yeah, like Manuel. I don't even remember the names I get. But yeah, so-and-so has voted, so-and-so has not voted. And then they keep track of it. And then they are continuing to call the people throughout the day. It's intense. It sounds intense. And that's because it is. So that's how that works with the big picture with phone banking. Cost, feasibility, I give it a 1. It's expensive if you're paying people to be doing your phone banking, which you totally can. There's services out there that'll pick it up for you, and they'd love to have that business. And it's companies that are just geared toward political phone banking. They do this. GOTV, they got it. And then when you consider all the volunteers it would take as well, like out doing door-to-door precinct walking, it's a lot. It's a big effort. Even for pretty big races, it's a huge effort to have this like ground game, they call it. So I put feasibility and cost 1 out of 5. Okay, let's keep moving here. Well, before we do, its rating, we gave it a 13. Just add up all the scores here. So phone banking 13. Now let's take a look at social media. So this is just posting on various social media, reminding and encouraging people to vote. So for awareness, I gave it a 3 out of 5 because you can run paid ads and that can increase this and boost it. And it's in writing and it's in people's faces because more and more people have their faces in their phones on social media. So it's a good place to have it there. Milestone 2, support. I gave it a 4 out of 5 because you can tell the exact story you want to tell coming out of your mouth and be able to persuade people with, if you're posting videos, you're going live, the whole social media strategy that we talked about in chapter 6, I think. You can tell that's how you're going to be trying to do as much support persuasion as you can. So it's pretty effective, 4 out of 5. Milestone 3, tracking. I give it a 1 out of 5 because it's difficult to identify supporters on social that have seen social media posts and be able to relay that back to your own voter database. It's easy to get your list of voters and be able to target them with ads on social media, in particular Facebook, but it's hard for that to go back, to reverse it back the other way. If you did, it would take a ton of volunteers to go through it, and so it's a 1 out of 5 there for tracking. Milestone 4, election date. I gave it the same rating, 3 out of 5 as awareness. You can run paid ads, to increase this, but you can generally get people pretty aware of the election date and have it in front of their face in writing. I keep saying in front of their face, it sounds so aggressive. In front of their eyes, have it in front of their eyes in writing fairly often leading up to the election date. Milestone 5, casting a ballot. So there's no research that I've seen specific to social media about does it actually turn voters out, except one that I saw, and it was more about social pressure. So when friends and other cared ones, or when people know one another and that person has and one person has voted and is checking in on the other person that they already know to see if they voted, then that can increase voter turnout, and in a pretty powerful, meaningful way. So actually Facebook has run some research projects about this in the past, seeing if, if pieces of the electorate were exposed to messages in their news feed saying, like if my friends Danielle and Gian, if they saw in their news feed, hey, Chris Moore voted this morning, did you vote yet? Then that is more powerful than just a simple message saying, hey, it's election day, don't forget to vote. So it's this like social pressure, social awareness aspect that can help to drive people to the ballot. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 because this is something that you could encourage your supporters to do. It's a pretty easy ask, asking them to post on their social media platforms. Hey friends, I know you've probably been bombarded with election-related communications lately, but I just want you to know that I voted this morning. It's a super critical election to vote in. Do you need any help, like trying to figure out where your polling place is? Does anybody need a ride? It's really, really important to me that you get out and vote. Don't forget to support Chris. So messages like that, that's something you can easily push out to your volunteers and get them to do. So cost and feasibility, I gave it a 5 out of 5. Most stuff that you do on social media is completely free unless you're running those paid ads. And how feasible is it? Super feasible, very easy to do. So total score for social media is 19. All right, next one here is door to door. So this is volunteers and staff and yourself going door to door and asking people to support you and if they're planning on voting. And this includes like door hanger lit drops. And that's basically like, it's like a piece of paper, but like heavy paper, like cardstock with a slit in it to go around a doorknob, and you hang it on people's door, and it has the date of the election. And also you can do it so that it has a little sticker on it telling people where their precinct is, like where they go to vote. That's a real helpful part of it. So milestone 1, 4 out of 5. If there is literature and it's dropped at the house, I give it a 4 out of 5 because then at that point it becomes the same as mail, but a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more visible because it's hanging on their actual door. So milestone number 2, support. So if you're having genuine conversations with people, then it has been shown to actually be persuasive. And this is the big call out here with genuine conversations. There's been a lot of research, probably the most research in GOTV and just voter persuasion in general has been done about door-to-door one-on-one conversations, and it has been shown to be effective, even with pretty big issues like with gay marriage. There were lots of studies that were done about showing, could you change voters' minds about do they support gay marriage or not? And the only kind of activities that were found to change people's minds, actually persuade them from one stance to another, was in very meaningful one-on-one conversations with voters. So that's tough to do, really tough to do. But if those conversations are had in a door-to-door manner like that, then it can change support stances and persuade people to support your candidacy more. So I got a 4 out of 5 on that one. Milestone number 3, tracking. I gave it a 3 out of 5 because you are talking to voters. So you are able to receive that communication, receive that information back from them. But in terms of then actually tracking it, it can be a bit cumbersome and it's not digital. You're having to write it down unless you have new software that people and volunteers are able to put as an app on their phone or live software with maybe Google Docs or Google Sheets or something that you can use that way. But it can be a bit cumbersome either way. So milestone number 4, election date. So this is similar to awareness. If you have a lit drop or a door hanger, then it really boosts it there and gets it right in front of people. So 4 out of 5 on that. And then milestone 5, casting a ballot. So what has also been shown in the research here, same as when we talked about support, is that if you do have those meaningful conversations with people, then it can encourage them to actually turn out and vote. And also, if you combine this with the phone banking that we were talking about and have like a door-to-door ground campaign working in combination with the phone bank, then that can prove to be a powerful combination as well. Cost and feasibility here, I've given it a 1 out of 5 because it is expensive to do this, to go door to door. So if you were to do this, I would save it for the GOTV weekend for sure. And if you're short on volunteers and you have a hard time getting people to get out there and walk precincts for you and actually, you know, like hit the pavement, then I would save this for GOTV weekend because, you know, it's not very feasible. It's tough. So that's for door to door. And when you add it all up, you get a 20 for door to door. All right, our last one here, texting. So this is volunteers texting one-on-one to voters or in like software mediation with voters. And there's some software out there now that allows volunteers to text tons of people one-on-one. And yeah, so that's really, really amazing because you can like blast through it very quickly. So for awareness, I said 5 out of 5 here. Text messages, there's an 80% open rate on text messages. That's like amazing when you consider email open rates are in the single digits most of the time and like low single digits a lot of the time. So milestone 2, support, I did a 1 out of 5 because how much are you really going to change someone's mind in 140 characters? And that's best practices for texting is to keep it under 140 characters because the format can get kind of screwed up when it goes over that. Milestone 3, tracking, I did 4 out of 5 because if you ask someone, hey, are you planning on voting? All they have to do is write back yes. And like, or are you planning on supporting Chris Moore for supervisor? All they have to do is write yes or no or quit freaking texting me. Milestone 4, election date, 5 out of 5 again. Once again, it's like high open rate. It's right to people's phones and everyone has their phones attached to them 24/7. So it's a good way of letting people know about the election date. Milestone 5, getting people to cast their ballot. This is really uncertain. I kind of assumed some things about text messages and combined with research that was out there about emails, which was limited to, just kind of used my intuition here and said 3 out of 5 because it is, you know, it's like right there in people's pocket so that you know the message is going to get to them. Then also if you were able to combine it with like a peer social kind of aspect, as we were talking about how like social pressure can increase voter turnout. So if you have volunteers that are texting to either, you know, people that they know in the community or to just the voter rolls and saying like, hey, you know, this is so-and-so and, you know, I voted, did you vote? Some sort of like social pressure aspect like that could boost it as well. So that's why I give it a 3 out of 5 here. Cost and feasibility, I gave it a 3 out of 5 as well because it's not too hard to send text messages and mass texting can be pretty cheap as well. But the downside to like mass text message platforms or software that does that is you've probably seen this. You get a text message coming through and it just comes from like a 5 or 6 digit number. It's like, you know, 234-24 and you're like, this is clearly like marketing material. This isn't like a text message from my friend. So you're less likely to open it. But you've probably also gotten marketing type text messages or political type text messages from a number that looks like a regular phone number. That is probably coming from some of these new platforms for texting, and I'll include links to them in the comments. But where you can go on as the candidate and text a bunch of supporters all at once, kind of all at once, like very quickly you can text lots of supporters and it comes from a normal phone number and they can actually write back to you and you can respond and stuff. But it's a lot faster than actually typing out text message on your phone. So I gave it a cost and feasibility of 3 out of 5 because that software can have a price associated to it as well. Okay, so when you add that up, we have 21 for texting. So I knew I flew through those kind of fast, but that's because we got a lot of material to cover here, and I don't want anybody falling asleep on me. So in the next lesson, we'll take a look at the strategies that scored the highest here in our review, and we'll tie it together in one overall recommended approach for your GOTV efforts. Thanks, guys.